But first off, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that incident from this morning. Um, we've looked at the crime numbers. We haven't seen one of these in at least a few months. How do we prevent this?
You know, it's frustrating and something that we have to continue to talk about and ask people to take responsibility. And, ultimately, at the end of the day, we're seeing dramatic reductions in homicides and violent crimes, some of which the greatest in decades. The city is so much safer and stronger and healthier than it was just a few years ago. But when you have these isolated incidents, they're unsettling, they're frustrating. We have to double down and recommit to treating each other with respect, making sure we're protecting one another and making sure we stay safe. So frustrating day and incident, grateful nobody was more seriously hurt. But, we've got so much momentum going in this community. I just ask everybody to recommit to keeping themselves and their neighbors safe.
Yeah, and just today there were two, I call them kids, who were accused of murdering a 14-year-old. At what point, when we talk about youth crime in the city of Columbus, do we say enough is enough?
Well, we have been, and there have been dramatic reductions in youth crime and homicide and violence, and so we're glad that SWAT took these folks into custody and that more information was brought forth by the community. As you know, we had a 17% reduction in homicides last year. In the first quarter of this year, we had the lowest number of homicides in 25 years. Felonious assaults were down 25% last year. So we know there's great success taking place here based on the great work from the Columbus Division of Police, the number of tips coming in from the community. But we have to be vigilant and stay focused on making sure that we stay committed to this comprehensive safety strategy: prevention, intervention, and enforcement.
And as we continue to talk about kids, what is the city doing in terms of working with the juvenile justice system and the public school system out there to keep kids from offending and those who have offended from reoffending?
Well, as you talk about the comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy, it's based on prevention, intervention, and enforcement, because we need all three. We've made historic investments into summer programming, summer youth employment, after-school programming, which we know is making a difference with respect to making
How is it
it
making
safer.
a difference?
Well, we're seeing it in the numbers, in the drop in youth crime. I mean, you're hearing that from the juvenile judges and their in reductions there. We think in intervention, by investing in programs for kids that have gotten off on the wrong path that need to be put back on the right path. Those intervention efforts are critically important. Both intervention programs offered through the city and through partners that we work with, whether it's Community for New Directions, whether it's the Urban League and others, to do those critically important intervention efforts, but also enforcement. Continuing to fund 3 police classes a year, continuing to add tools to Real-Time Crime Center, continue to increase money for cameras and lighting. That's why we're seeing this historic and significant drop in crime. But you also raise a good point, and that is the frustration that many in law enforcement and prosecutors had with juvenile judges, and making sure that if we have young people engaging in dangerous and reckless behavior, that they're being held accountable. And I think folks were really frustrated a few years ago that young people were out on the streets and back in their neighborhoods before the officers who arrested them had finished filling out the paperwork and started working with prosecutors. And so I know the chief has been working with, and I've been working with the juvenile judges to really focus on a small number of young people that are continuing to commit more and more violent crimes, particularly involving guns. And I think we're starting to see some progress there.
Yeah, and one more question that we're not talking about tomorrow, that of course there's a lot of changes going on right now at the federal level and the state level in terms of funding. So when it comes to the projects that Columbus has leaned on for federal and state grants, how concerned are we about the future of that money?
Well, I think we have to remain strong advocates for federal and state partnership. Over half of the positions at the Department of Columbus Public Health are funded by the federal government. We think public health has never been more important coming out of a pandemic and seeing measles outbreaks around the country. And so it's critically important. I think the people of Columbus send a lot of tax dollars to Washington in their federal taxes. We all need to demand that those dollars come back to our city, come back into our neighborhoods to provide the safety, the health, the development, the infrastructure that we need to continue to grow our economy here locally. So I'm continuing to talk with our members of Congress using my position as president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, through the reconciliation process and through the tax rewrite later this year. We know this, that over 80% of America's GDP and the state's GDP run through our metro economies, our cities. Our cities are our past, our present, and our future of economic development, job creation, and quality of life. And so our safeties need to be strong, they need to be safe, they need to be healthy, but we need the federal and state government to partner with us to continue to do that.
So a lot of the stuff that we plan on talking about tomorrow revolves around housing. Of course, that has been a huge focus for the city of Columbus. Why does the city feel it needs to intervene in the housing market, not just leave it up to private development?
Well, we've underbuilt since before the Great Recession. So you talk about the last 10, 12, 14 years. We've done a great job of creating jobs. We haven't done nearly enough in making sure that there's more housing available for folks at every price point. We believe strongly that you ought to be able to live here in this community if you work here. So regardless of whether or not you're a cop, firefighter, a nurse, a bus driver, we believe that everybody that serves this community should be able to afford to live here as well. And so what we've proposed, in addition to our zoning code update, the first chapter of that started last year, was the first significant code update in 70 years, really embracing density and height along major transit corridors, which were part of the Link Us ballot issue that passed overwhelmingly last fall by the voters. Before our code update, we anticipated 6,000 units along those corridors in the next 10 years. After that code update, 88,000 units. That's nearly half of what we need in the region. And my commitment was, if we need 200,000 more units in the region, we'll put 100,000 more units inside the city of Columbus, and we think zone-in's a big part of that. But we also think this bond package is a big part of it. So I'm announcing that we're going to put before the voters a bond package that we put before the voters about every 3 or 4 years that allow them to approve and support investments in infrastructure in their neighborhoods. So by law, they're broken down into 5 buckets. One is neighborhood development. That's the dedication of money for housing, health and safety, recreation and parks, public service, infrastructure, roadways, bridges, and then public utilities. And so the great part about these bond packages is that we can invest billions of dollars into infrastructure without raising our taxes, because we haven't levied a property tax in the city since 1956, because we take a quarter of every dollar in income tax revenue and put it into the special income tax fund, the SIT fund, which covers debt service on our capital programs and in capital infrastructure investments. So it allows us to invest in ourselves, housing, roads, water, safety, lighting projects that really improve our quality of life, create jobs, without raising our taxes. So what I'm proposing is the largest issue for housing in the city's history. We did $50 million in 2019, $200 million in 2022. I'm proposing a $500 million neighborhood development housing issue. We'll fill in more of the details in the other buckets of the bond package next month. But I think this is an unprecedented time where we have to make a transformational, a significant investment in housing to deal with the supply crisis that's out there. We know that people are paying more in rent and for homes than they ever have before, and that those costs are growing faster than their wages. The best way to deal with this is to deal with the supply crisis. And if you go back to Econ 101 and your supply is flat and demand continues to grow, that's why you're seeing the rents and the home prices and an uptick in street homelessness. Yeah. We think the best way to fight those things is more units at every price point throughout the region.
And do we really think there'll be an adjustment? We've had so many people pay $400,000, $500,000 for a $200,000 home. Even if we add these extra houses, people aren't going to want to see their property values go down.
Actually, what you see is that housing prices and rents can actually slow down the rate of growth. The more units you bring online. Austin's a great example of that, where they weren't building nearly enough for a long period of time, have dramatically increased their supply, and you're actually seeing rents and home prices come down in Austin for the first time in decades. We want to try to get ahead of it and make sure that we're investing in the supply that we need to make sure that seniors, people on fixed incomes, are able to stay in their homes today, and that our kids are able to afford rents and the ability to buy homes in the decades to come. The way that we continue to make sure that we leverage one of our greatest competitive advantages, affordability, is by dealing with this supply crisis.
And as we continue to talk about supply, Columbus has an older housing stock, especially on the south end. I noticed that, we're talking about creating this property wholesale register here. It's already going to target, that's, I guess, kind of the slang term are flippers out there. How do we do this in a city not come across as being overbearing in that process?
Well, it's really important. This is one of those things, both the vacant and abandoned property registry, the foreclosure registry, all these things came about because neighborhood and community leaders were really, really frustrated that they didn't have good contact information for folks that were responsible for these properties, and whether or not they were up to code, whether or not they were a negative, detrimental impact on the quality of life in neighborhoods. So this is something neighborhood and community leaders have been asking for years, and we think is going to make a great opportunity for them to hold folks accountable, and the greater community holding folks accountable for folks that aren't doing their fair share and aren't being good neighbors to folks at the community level. We think there's a balancing act, and one of the things we're doing is creating the Division of Housing Stability within the Department of Development, because we want to be a good place for landlords. We want a good place, be a good city and community for business, but we also need to stand up for tenants and help them fight back against shady landlords that have exploited them or taken advantage of them, and taken advantage of this supply crisis that we have in place right now. And so whether you look at Colonial Village, you look at Latitude 525, those are both examples of where shady landlords and property owners took advantage of some of the most vulnerable neighbors in our community. And so this Office of Housing Stability will help fight back and stand up for those tenants and hold shady landlords accountable, and most importantly, keep people in their homes, right? The last thing we want for seniors or for families or for children is the instability and sometimes the downward spiral of being homeless. And that's what a big focus of the Housing Stability Office will be as well.
Yeah, and we're also attempting to hold landlords accountable if their tenants are forced to move in an emergency situation, that they have to cover that.
As opposed to taxpayers.
Yeah.
I mean, when you take a look at that Latitude 525 and Colonial Village, the people of Columbus stepped up to help our neighbors in crisis and in need. Those landlords should be held accountable for that, and that's part of what we're going to be putting in place with this new division of housing stability.
And do we trust these landlords not to punish their tenants by, for example, raising rents?
That's part of the work of the division, and part of their focus. And certainly we're going to bring the full force of the city government to make sure that people are being treated fairly, that they are in safe and sanitary conditions, and that landlords are being held accountable.
Yeah, and when the city talks about improving neighborhoods and all the investments there, a couple parts that you highlighted were in the Hilltop and the Linden neighborhoods. Let's focus on Linden. The investments that the city has put in there in terms of money and improvements, are we seeing a payoff for that?
I would ask the people of Linden, and I think the quality of life of Linden has never been higher, and the future has never been brighter. But we're not stopping. We're not patting ourselves on the back. Yes, over $500 million has been invested both publicly and privately to fund the One Linden plan that was created and driven by the people of Linden, and the Envision Hilltop plan. And as you know, we've just finished up a plan for East Linden. We're already seeing great investments there, partnerships with the First Church of God, Columbus State Community College, the Mid-Ohio Food Collective. So we're excited about what we're already seeing in Eastland, but we're going to continue to invest in the Hilltop and Linden. And the great part about those neighborhood plans is they're really blueprints and call to actions for the private sector and philanthropic partners about where to make investments and what the priorities of the community are. So we're really proud of them because, when I first ran for mayor back in 2015, it was all about neighborhoods, neighborhoods, neighborhoods is my top 3 priorities. And we wanted to make sure that every family in every neighborhood was sharing in our success. So I've been purposeful and intentional about investing in neighbors and neighborhoods that had been left out or left behind. And I think what you're seeing with Linden, the Hilltop, and now Eastland is a realization of the dreams and the priorities of the people of those neighborhoods.
Yeah. And kind of the final thing to wrap it up as we talk about violence trends in the city of Columbus. Last year, our homicides were down, our violence was down, but one thing that stands out and continues to stand out is that of domestic violence. It's a nationwide trend. How do we stop it in Columbus?
Well, it takes a community-wide response. We can't ask the police to solve this scourge in domestic violence we're seeing. And you're absolutely right, it isn't just unique to Columbus. But as we brought homicides down dramatically, some of the lowest amounts we've seen in decades, the number of homicides related to domestic violence situations continues to grow and not go down with all those other stats. And so we've made some significant investments in Choices, which, as you know, is the only 24/7 domestic violence shelter in Central Ohio, more beds, more resources, more support. We need everybody to be involved in the solutions. We need faith leaders, we need business owners, we need service providers and others in the community to all be part of the solution. So I've asked our Director of Office of Violence Prevention, Rena Shack, to come up with a comprehensive plan for us to deal with this domestic violence that we're seeing increase in places across the community. And so we'll be sharing more details of that plan next month. We'll talk about a little bit of the framework in the state of the city. But this remains a top priority because it's absolutely unacceptable. And we need to figure out how we're going to deal with this as a community. And it's not expecting the police to solve this for us.
Anything that I didn't ask you that I should have?
Can I send you home without talking about women's sports?
Oh, yeah, that's right. You keep reminding me. So one of the things I'm really excited about is challenging the rest of the people of this city and community to aspire to become the nation's capital for women's sports. I mean, when you think about, we have one of the only professional women's sports teams in Ohio in our Columbus Fury that are part of the Professional Volleyball Federation. You think about the fact we're going to host in 2027 for the second time in 10 years both the NCAA Women's Volleyball Final Four and Basketball Final Four. This is an incredible opportunity for us to continue the highest level, attracting the highest level of women's sports here. But this is much more than just hosting events and bringing money in for tourism and hotels and restaurants. This is about really investing in a pipeline of leaders of our companies, of our institutions of higher ed, of our governments, of our philanthropic organizations. We know the longer girls and women are involved in sports at the highest levels competitively, the more likely they are to lead organizations that they become part of in the future. We know that a lot of girls stop participating in sports around the 8th grade. And so we need more girls to stay involved in sports and then attract the best and the brightest from around the country, not just to come play for Ohio State, but for Ohio Wesleyan and for Capital and these other great institutions of higher ed. And then once they're here, connect them with companies and employers and institutions of higher ed where they can go work once their playing days are done, and that we elevate them into this pipeline of leadership for the next generation. We think it's an incredible opportunity, and if you talk to a lot of major employers and corporations, their strongest leaders are ones that were in competitive sports, and particularly women in our C-suites, our deans, our provosts, our leaders of philanthropic organizations all played women's sports, and we think it's a great opportunity.
All right. Hey, appreciate it.
You bet.
All right. Yeah.